Yes, Prof. We can see now.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm going to be talking about where and how to get help for the suicidal person. I heard you say for those on this call, but first of all, I do hope sincerely that nobody has suicidal ideas currently on this call. But if they do, know that there is hope. But I'll also try to tailor this so those of us who listen can also be of assistance to others. I basically want to talk about suicide and attempted suicide, and the state of mind of the suicidal individual. A few myths about suicide, and mention the telltale signs of a suicide bid. The things that can point you to the suspicion that somebody probably wants to take their own life. And then how to get help, which is what I'm really supposed to talk about. Tips for the individual and those of us who want to help, and direct all of us to a few resources that we have to assist in this venture. So, according to the WHO, there are probably approximately 1 million suicides per year worldwide. As you all recognize, usually suicidal ideation and completed suicides are often bereft of the right statistics because there's a lot of stigma associated with suicide, certainly in our part of the world and in most places. And even when people attempt suicide and are not successful, it's not very often that it is recorded as a suicide attempt. And if they do succeed, in many places, a lot goes into trying to cover the fact that indeed it was a suicide. Even carrying out a forensic audit is difficult because in many societies, they don't even want to talk about it anymore. In many places in Ghana, the person is buried in an unmarked grave somewhere in the forest outside the normal burying place for the community. According to the Ghana Mental Health Authority, between January and June of 2021, 417 cases of attempted suicide were reported in Ghana. So this for 6 months. Sometimes it's seasonal, but let's assume that this is for half a year. So we're saying that a minimum of 800 plus cases were reported in Ghana of attempted suicide. I'm almost certain that this probably represents less than half of the attempts. Be that as it may, it's still serious if we consider that at least 1,000 people attempt suicide in Ghana. And these are the ones that have been unsuccessful. We do not have proper statistics for those who actually make it, unfortunately. Now, according to helpguide.org, which is one of the resources for helping people deal with suicidal issues, suicide is a desperate attempt to escape unbearable suffering. So the assumption is that people who are suicidal believe or indeed are suffering some kind of pain, emotional pain, sometimes physical pain also, desperation. Now, lots of people go through pain, but for somebody with suicide, there's a feeling of hopelessness, a belief that nothing will give them the relief that they so want. A suicidal patient is blinded by feelings of self-loathing, hatred, hopelessness, and isolation. And they don't see any avenue for relief but death. Many of them, in fact, do wish that there were alternatives, but in that state of mind, they cannot see any other way out. So I seem to be frozen. Can you hear me at least?
Yes, Prof, we can hear you, yes.
Okay,
The
sorry.
slide has changed.
Okay, thank you. So there are a few misconceptions about suicide that we want to address. These are what we would call myths. They are generally not true, but they are very popular. And many people relate them as if they were gospel. The first is that people who talk about suicide won't really do it. That is patently false. As a matter of fact, almost all the people who attempt suicide give some hints. It may be in an indirect manner, even in a jovial manner. But please take seriously anybody who keeps talking repeatedly about wanting to take their life, being fed up, or not wanting to live anymore. So it is not correct that people who talk about suicide won't really do it. In fact, you should have your antenna up once you hear talk like this. The second misconception is that if you are talking of killing yourself, then you must be mad, you must be crazy. You must be having some serious mental illness. It is true that many suicide attempters have mental illness. But the truth also is that they may not necessarily be psychotic. Most of them are depressed, distressed, or grief-stricken. They are in some kind of emotional pain. It could be from the illness or something else. But it is a fact that they are very distraught and they don't see a way out. It does not necessarily mean that all suicidal patients have diagnosable mental illness or are mentally ill. Another misconception is that those who are determined to kill themselves, sorry, there's nothing that will stop them. You can't help them. We know that even the most depressed persons, even at the point when they are contemplating suicide, still are conflicted. They are not sure whether indeed it is the right decision or not. And many of them may be in that state for quite a number of days before they make whatever move in whatever direction they should decide. The reality is that what these people really want is for their emotional pain to stop. And it is a fact also that the suicidal impulses that they get do recede after some time, even without intervention. So that gives us a window of opportunity to let them recognize that, in fact, there is hope, that it is not true that because you are having a strong urge to take your life right now, it will continue like that. It goes away. Some people have had these experiences for 2 or 3 different occasions in their lives. So they can confirm that you may have suicidal ideas at one time, but if you manage to work through it or somebody helps you through it, you will come back stronger and recognize that indeed there was something amiss at the time. And yet at the time they were having these ideas, they thought that there was no hope. Another myth is that the ones who succeed, those who die by suicide, are those who decided that they didn't want any help at all. So they just went ahead and did it. We know that more than half of those who die by suicide would have sought help in the 6 months prior to their death. That's what the data suggests. When you do a retrospective study or an audit of those who actually succeed in dying by suicide, you find that quite a significant number reached out, either went to hospital, made complaints about their depression or some other problem they're having, and either not enough attention was paid to it, or even if it was, they didn't get the required help. So they do reach out. It is not that because they are so determined, they will definitely just go ahead and die. The last one I want to talk about is that when you talk about suicide, you give people the idea. This, unfortunately, is common even among psychiatric residents and doctors. So they are very hesitant to ask people directly whether they have suicidal ideas. It does sound crude and very cruel to see your fellow human being and ask him whether he wants to, kill himself. But you don't need to do it in such a manner. You can always say it in a nice way by asking, do you sometimes wish that, death will just take you, or that if you slept, you will not wake up, or that you are not here anymore? But even if you have to say, you get thoughts of wanting to take your life, it's all right. That is not what gives them the idea. On the contrary, if they have such thoughts, they will quickly tell you, how did you know? The truth is that, in fact, I've been thinking about it. And they may then go ahead even to tell you what they have done in pursuit of these unfortunate thoughts. So it is totally false that if you talk about suicide, you are the one giving them the idea. The opposite is in fact true. So raise the issue with the individual and encourage them to talk openly and honestly, in much the same way as you should also talk openly and honestly about it. It actually helps to save lives. Next thing is, what are the warning signs of suicide? First thing is, any talk or gesture of suicide must be taken seriously. Don't dismiss it and say, oh, this one, he just wants attention. That's why they are doing this. Please. As living beings, it's instinctual, inherent in us, that we must want to preserve our lives. That is why when you are close to a burning fire, you quickly draw back. In fact, apart from suicide bombers, which is a totally different phenomenon, anybody who faces the possibility of not even death, imminent danger or harm, usually tries to recede from it. That's why when somebody strikes you at you suddenly, your instinct is to try to dodge the blow or to block it. And therefore, anybody who talks of wanting to take their own life must be regarded as doing something which is grossly out of the ordinary. And we must take it seriously and try to do something about it. So when somebody is talking about killing themselves or harming themselves, or some of them keep writing a lot of poetry or letters to close friends about death or dying. When death or dying is your favorite theme repeatedly, we must start worrying about whether indeed these are thoughts that you are harboring about yourself. We know of some famous writers and poets who ended up taking their own lives. Ernest Hemingway is one of them. A great writer, but he had bouts of depression and eventually took his own life. So when people are writing mostly about death and dying, we must take a warning from that. If anybody prepares by acquiring medications they want to take, weapons, or things like in Ghana, one of the common things is bleach and insecticides and things like that, which they can drink. If you talk to the individual and he says, well, look, I've been having these thoughts. I've decided that I will just drink something or take an overdose or something. I've actually got the medications. You must know that we have a problem. Now, if these individuals who are expressing these thoughts also suffer from mood disorders, by that I mean episodes of depression, or they've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, or they have an alcohol use disorder, people who are using a lot of alcohol or drugs, or if this individual has a family history of suicide, or has previously attempted suicide, then the risks are even more, and we must take these warnings very seriously. Another very common sign, but which we often miss because we don't ask about it, and even when patients express it, we think it's just one of those signs of depression, is an expression or feeling of hopelessness. When an individual says that, look, I don't think there's any hope. I'm so depressed. Look, things are so bad. Nothing can help me. Anybody who expresses hopelessness, you must consider the strong possibility that the next thing would be to attempt suicide. Also, if the individual shows sudden mood swings, somebody who's been stable or even manic, and then suddenly they go into a bout of depression with changes like sleep, not being able to sleep, becoming very withdrawn and isolating themselves, neglecting themselves, loss of interest in things. And this happens fairly suddenly, as it does in many people with bipolar disorder and rapid onset depression. You must consider the possibility of attempting suicide. Other warning signs of suicide include getting your affairs in order. Suddenly, the person makes a will or starts giving away their prized possessions, or saying goodbye in a manner suggestive that you might not meet again. Suddenly, they seek out old friends, people they've not seen for a long time, and say, well, okay, bye-bye, I'm going somewhere, or I'm traveling, we may not meet again. Or calling people out of the blue and saying goodbyes. You must be extremely worried. When people become very isolated, socially withdrawn, you didn't know them to be that way. Now they don't pick up calls, they don't want to talk to anybody, they are very withdrawn. And those who engage in self-destructive behavior. He used to be a fairly careful driver, but suddenly he's driving like a racing driver. He starts using drugs and alcohol fairly recklessly. It's almost as if he has a death wish. And maybe when his attention is drawn to, he says, oh, look, what has happened before? If I die, I die. When this is out of character, again, it may be a warning sign that they may be wanting to harm themselves. One other ominous sign is a sudden sense of calm after a period of depression. Person has been depressed, you all know, you've been battling with it, and then suddenly they appear to be fine. You see him and they say, oh, you know, don't worry, now everything is going to be okay. You are a bit surprised by the sudden change. Please, when you see that, do not say he's getting better. Ask whether they've decided that maybe they've had enough and they want to go the other way. So what are the few tips that we have to prevent deliberate self-harm or suicide? The first thing I'd like to say is that please speak up. Silence on either part, whether it is you, the observer, or the individual, is an ominous sign. When you have a suspicion Don't wait for the person to say it. You ask them. There's nothing wrong. Why have you become so quiet? Why are you thinking of doing something to yourself? There's nothing wrong with asking. In fact, sometimes they are relieved that somebody has asked, and they may then pour out their hearts to you. And when they do give you a chance, please listen to the individual. Let them talk. And whilst they are talking, do not be judgmental. Don't say things like, how do you want to kill yourself? Are you crazy? Do you know that you go to hell? And the kind of things that people say. Instead, be sympathetic. You do understand that they are in a lot of distress, and you can identify with why they feel this way. All you need to do is offer them hope, to tell them that contrary to what they think, nothing is ever as bad as it seems in the beginning. And yes, they may be having these impulses, but they will also come to pass. And that there is help. Other people have been through it and have come out stronger, and so they can be helped. You must always reassure them and let them know that these thoughts will go away. Above all, please always take the individual seriously. Don't make a joke out of it and say, what are you talking about? Look, forget to snap out of it. Please never do that. Now, what are the don'ts? Absolutely do not argue with the person or challenge their judgment. Tell them things like, do you know that if you die, your family will suffer if you die? They know. It's just that at that stage in their lives and the way they feel, they genuinely believe that there's no way out, although we all know that there is. But do not tell them that they don't know what they are talking about or that they are making a huge mistake. Tell them you understand them, give them hope and reassurance, and try to do something about it. Get them help if you are not able to help yourself. Another thing that you should not do is when you hear somebody telling you about these thoughts or what their plans are, to look shocked or start giving them a lecture on morals. Do you know that this is a sin? Do you know? Please, let's stay away from that. That will help nobody. It is not that these people are not aware of what they want to do. They are aware. It's just that whilst they are not sure, at that stage, they feel that there's no other alternative. So be very measured in how you talk to them. Understand them, do not be judgmental, do not argue, and just keep on reassuring and actively try to assist them by getting help for them. Do not also promise confidentiality or secrecy, because they tell you, you know, I've confided in you, I've told you that this is what I plan, but don't tell my parents. Because you might have to tell somebody. In fact, sometimes you should tell somebody if you're not able to be with them directly. Because you need people who will be able to take care of the individual. You don't just let them go home without telling their close relations. And the next thing you hear is that it has happened. How would you feel? So don't tell them that there will be confidentiality. Tell them that, well, look, I will try to help you. But you know, we need to tell other people who are close to you, who also love you, who will help you. That is the only way we can navigate this difficult terrain. Now, how do we reach the decisions? We have to do a quick suicide risk assessment, because it is true that lots of people talk about suicide, and who will not actually attempt it or who will not do it successfully. Now, we determine the seriousness or otherwise of it by a few things. One, do they have a plan? Two, do they have the means to do it? Have they set a time frame within which to do this? And do they truly have the intention to attempt or commit suicide? Sorry, we shouldn't be using the term commit anymore. So how do we determine the risk? If somebody has suicidal ideas, he admits that he's been having these thoughts, they cross his mind. But they have not drawn out a plan. And they tell you, well, these thoughts occurred to me, but I have no intention, I'm not going to do it. Generally, this is a low risk because you'll be surprised that a considerable proportion of people do have suicidal ideas. Many years ago, I remember there was a student, two students actually, who came to our department for a short-term mentorship thing. And we decided to do a study in the schools around Kolebu there. I was quite shocked to find that more than 40% of the student population admitted to at least having thoughts of taking their lives before. Luckily, we didn't have any episodes at that time, although I must admit we didn't follow them up completely. But the idea that even up to 40% of people, young people, had this thought crossing their mind was quite frightening. But if they have the thoughts, they have no plan, and they tell you they won't attempt it, generally the risk is low. If they have the thoughts, they've made some vague plans, but the plans are not really, they say, well, I'm thinking that maybe I'll take some overdose or something. Have you got the medication? No, but have you got it? Well, maybe I'll go and buy some. But they tell you, well, I've thought about all this, but really I don't think that I will attempt suicide. Then we would say the risk is moderate. If they have suicidal thoughts, they have a plan that is potentially lethal. That is a plan that can actually kill. If the person tells you that, look, if I take 50 tablets of this antidepressant medication that you give me, I'm sure I'll go. Or I've gone to buy some rat poison. I'm sure that if I take a good dose of it, I will go. After all, why am I living? And I'm going to, that's the plan. And you ask them whether, so indeed, do they want to attempt suicide? They say, well, I've been thinking about it, but I won't. That is still a high risk because the thoughts are there and they have a plan which is workable. Even if they say they won't attempt it, you don't know when the tide will change. If anybody has suicidal thoughts, they have a specific plan which is lethal and tell you that they intend to carry it out. Nothing can stop me, I'm fed up. That person has a severe risk and is at imminent risk of suicide. So having done this brief assessment to determine whether the risk is low, moderate, high, or severe, there are other things we need to be aware of. That if they have mental illness, especially if they have depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, or they be using alcohol or drugs, if there's a family history, a previous attempt, or history of abuse or trauma, that individual has suffered abuse, whether male or female, whether the abuse took place when they were young or later on, then the risk factors for suicide increase. If the person has a terminal illness, he's been diagnosed with a serious illness for which we are not sure they are going to recover, or they suffer from a condition which gives them chronic pain, or recently have lost a close relation, or are facing a stressful life event. If the people are very isolated, they have hardly any relations or friends, they are on their own, or strangely, the person has been put on antidepressants. We know that one of the side effects of antidepressants, especially in the first 2 months, it's not common, but it is a recognized side effect, is to increase suicidal ideation. So somebody has depression, he may not even be suicidal. Strangely, when you put them on antidepressants the first 2 months, you must monitor them closely for the presence of suicidal ideation. So all these act as risk factors. So if we have these people, we've assessed their risk, we know that the likelihood is there. What do we do? If the person is at imminent risk, high risk, severe risk, or has underlying mental illness, or you in your judgment, there's a true risk of suicide, please do not leave them alone. When it comes to your attention, if you can't be with them, try to arrange so that some close person in whom you can confide is with them. Because they may not, but on the other hand also, they may. They don't know when. Sometimes they themselves are not sure. If you're a doctor who is seeing such a person who you think is an imminent suicidal risk, then you must admit the individual. If the contact is by phone or through somebody and in your judgment, there's a high risk, then you recommend an emergency room visit as quickly as possible. For individuals who are judged below to medium risk for suicide and who you cannot hospitalize or do not want to be hospitalized, there are a few practical things you can do. Strange as it sounds, if you get them to sign a contract, complete with witnesses, whilst you continue with your therapy or before admission becomes feasible, in the short term, it's a very helpful thing. Let's say you see the person on Friday and you really think that they must go on admission. There's no bed, there's no possibility of admitting that day, and he has to go home over the weekend. You are not sure of what help they can get whilst they are away from you. But they offer you an opportunity to say that, well, they'll consider, they'll wait. Let them sign a contract, proper contract that I so undertake not to do anything to harm myself, and that if I guess to call you on this number, something like that, get a witness to sign for you and for them. They take it seriously. This contract binds the individual not to attempt any potentially harmful action, but maybe to call you or another person if they get the impulse. For the general public, besides getting to an emergency room or seeing a mental health expert, there are emergency phone calls available. In many countries, they have them. In Ghana, I believe our emergency line now is 199. I think it used to be 999 long ago. If you go on the internet, it's 999 that you see. But I think that, I'm not sure whether it's 199. It goes to police, go to fire service, ambulance, whatever. And you can place this call. It does not matter whether it's picked up by fire service or police. I think that if you seriously tell them that this individual or you yourself are having these thoughts, hopefully some help will come. We also have a number here. It's not something you can easily keep in your memory, but it's good to have so that if you want to help somebody, you might be able to call. It's an 02444-71279. But as I said, at least you can call the emergency line and keep this one in a diary on your phone so that if you need to help somebody, you will be able to. Then we have a whole host of numbers and contacts. The Mental Health Authority and the Psychiatric Association of Ghana has compiled a list, region by region. There are various clinics and locations where you can get help. For example, in Ashanti region, we have quite a number. There's a Recovery Pathways Clinic. There's Free Think Health Consult. There's Discovery Medical Center in Sofo Line, Walter Aiden Specialist Clinic, Smart Health Consult, Living Waters, New Hope, and a whole lot of them. In Greater Accra, there's the Brain Clinic, Peace Be Clinic, North Ridge Clinic, Holy Trinity Medical's Hospital, Accra Medical Center, Eka City Medics in Nesta Square Airport, Barnum Memorial Hospital, Corporate Wellness, Distress Consult in Jolu. Then there's Equilinks in Sakumono, Health Link Medical Clinic in East Legon, Harm Center in Dansuman, La Paz Community Hospital, Mission Clinic, Nyaho Medical Center, Progressive Life Society in Abelinkpe, Sinel Specialist Hospital in Tema, and Smart Health Consult. There's Total House Clinic also. When we go to the Upper East, there's Passion for Total Care Mental Health Clinic in Boku or close to Boku. In the Central Region, we have Clinical Christian Psychoeducational Service. Northern Region, there's Shekina in Gurugu. These are independent or private facilities, but we also have the government hospitals and specifically the psychiatric hospitals. There are hospitals that we know have psychiatrists, and I've listed them all here. Accra Psychiatric Hospital, Pantang, 37 Military Hospital, Kolebu, University of Ghana Medical Center, Legon Hospital, Police Hospital, Kuko Clinic, the Bank Hospital, and Trust Hospital. So it would be, we have quite a number of resources to which we can direct people, or we ourselves can go to if we are faced with a situation like this. And I will urge all of us to take any report or suspicion of suicidal ideation seriously. Let's not hesitate or shy away from talking about the issue. Let's discuss it frankly without being judgmental. Let's not argue with the individuals, but we should sympathize and empathize with them. And let us always offer hope, because remember that anybody who expresses hopelessness is already a high risk for suicide. If there's a family history, if they have underlying mental illness, or if they have attempted before, the risk is even more than you would anticipate. So if we assess the risk quickly, if it's medium to low, there are simple things we can do. We can take our time to still direct them for help. And if we think the risk is high or severe, we should try to get them into an emergency room or see a mental health specialist as quickly as possible. The other government hospitals that we have on the list include Konfanochi, Tamale Teaching Hospital, Presbyterian Hospital, Upper East, Hu Teaching Hospital. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I shall end my presentation here. And hopefully when it's time for questions, we can all chip in. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Prof. And that was rather detailed and insightful. Thank you. My takeaway messages are asking about suicide does not put the idea in someone's head. And as a matter of fact, that tends to be comforting, because then they see that someone else understands them. So speak up. If you suspect something, speak up. The reason for this webinar is to let us all know that we all have a role to play. Yes, we have decriminalized suicidal attempt. And we are saying it's a freedom to live, not to die. But you have a role to play, I have a role to play. Be sympathetic, non-judgmental, offer hope, and take the person seriously. Thank you so very much. We'll now go on to Dr. Edunyako. And after Dr. Edunyako is done, we'll open the floor up for questions. But if you have a question, you can leave it in the chat box, and it will be addressed when we get to question time. Dr. Edunyako, please, are you ready? Dr. Edunyako, can you hear me? Hello, Pearl. That's my phone. Hello. Dr. Edunyako.
Yes.
Okay, Pearl. Welcome. Hello. Okay, it seems we lost Dr. Edunyakun again. Whilst we try to reconnect her, if there are any questions, I'm sure we can answer them as we wait for Dr. Edunyakun. Okay, so someone is requesting for the presentation via email, and we've taken notes of your email address. I'm sure the organizers will get back to you later, Kristen. Okay, someone else requesting for the presentation. Okay. Wouldn't the counselor charge for the service? Prof. I think this question is directed to you. The resources you shared.
Why should it be directed to me? Well, the a call to a hospital, a distress call, should by itself not generate a charge. Strictly speaking, we know that when it comes to emergencies, money should not be a consideration. Having said that, I do admit that sometimes it tends to, color our judgment and affect what we do. But I think that the possibility of a human life being lost is so great that we should regard this as any other emergency and do whatever we have to do. If it's just to give advice and direction, I want to believe that majority of people will not necessarily ask for a fee before they direct you to a mental health facility. If it becomes a question of the specific therapy that you are going to take in order to try to deal with the suicidal ideation, or maybe you are depressed and you are taking therapy for the condition, then I believe the issue of charges will come in. But certainly in the government facilities, the charges for mental health services are very low. And I believe that efforts are being made for some of these emergencies and the commonest conditions to be to be brought under the NHIS. So much as it is not a very comfortable thing to talk about, I would wish that money should be our last consideration when we are talking about saving a life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. And just to add to that, as Prof said, money shouldn't be an issue. Suicidal attempts, suicidal ideations are a few of the emergencies, psychiatric emergencies that we have. And I know that across Psychiatric Hospital, Pantang, Kolebu, we try to provide first aid. We handle the emergency before we ask for money, if need be. We've given medications, people have gone on admissions, received treatment for free without having to pay a dime. So if someone is suicidal, reach out, get the person help, and we'll discuss the issue of money when we get to that break. Okay, Hello, Dr. Edunyakun. Hello, Dr. Edunyakun. but Edunyako appears to still have challenges. There's a question here that maybe we can answer before as we wait. No, I think I skipped it. Let's see. Okay, so from Barbara. So after all the necessary help, if the person still commits the suicide, should the healthcare provider blame themselves?
I think self-blame is one of the unfortunate, I know it can occur, and it does occur in many people. I can tell you that I myself have found myself in that situation before. But suicide is a very complex thing. And as I said, even the individual who eventually succeeds in taking their own lives, they are conflicted, they are not very sure. That is why it doesn't just happen suddenly. The thoughts are there, they turn it around, they are not sure, but somehow it does happen sometimes. So whilst you may feel guilty, the truth is that you are not really responsible directly for, we should all be each other's keeper. But you didn't take his life. You did all you, be sure that you have done all that you should do. Get them the appropriate help and try to get proper treatment for them. Don't hide it. If, let's say, they confided in you and you did not tell anybody who should have been told, who could have helped, you may end up with such feelings. But otherwise, you should not blame yourself. I don't think that you are being fair on yourself. You shouldn't blame yourself. What you should do is at every opportunity to do all you can to try to save lives. Thank you, over.
Very much, Prof. Do all you can to try to save a life. Okay, so from Nabaki, I hope I got the name right. How often are individuals who attempted suicide actually charged? So that was tackled in our previous webinar. I'm not sure. Unless Prof has an idea how often individuals were.
You mean charged to court?
Yes.
Well, now that matter is moot because, as you know, the law has been passed. It's no more a criminal offense.
No more, yes.
In fact, they've gone beyond that to say that you must mandatorily be assessed by mental health specialists, which we are very happy about. The only downside is that they also did what I think is an overkill by saying that it means that they are suffering from severe mental illness. That we don't entirely agree with, because also it has the potential of stigmatizing people simply because they found themselves in this unfortunate situation. But in the past, there were some insightful officers of the law, police and so on, who actually brought such people to the hospital instead of charging them. But I've also seen a few cases where even judges have gone ahead and supposedly applied the letter of the law and thrown people into jail for attempting to take their own lives. When we get to know about it, we try to do what we can. We tried then. But the reality is that that's what the law said, which is why we are all very glad that it has been decriminalized. It was not, as time went on, fewer and fewer people. Many, many years ago, it was almost routine that once it was reported to the police, they would charge you to court. But these days, it is not, hopefully not going to happen anymore.
Thank you, Prof. Peter Apia Thompson, yes, please, you need to register and the link has already been posted in the chat box. Are pharmacological and non-pharmacological management options associated with suicide covered by the NHIS? Currently, no. As Prof mentioned, we are now fighting to get those costs to be covered by the NHIS, but currently, no. Can the slides be shared? Okay. A lot of people are asking for the slides. We'll see what we'll do. I'm sure the organizers have taken notes and will be shared at the appropriate time. Slides. Question. Okay. I am yet to read the law. However, I would like to know whether the new law mentioned anything about physician-assisted suicide and euthanasia. No. It did not mention anything about physician-assisted suicide. But Prof, if you have anything to add to that.
No, in Ghana, we do not have a law on physician-assisted suicide. In Ghana, it is still an offense to actively help anybody to take their lives. It is not allowed by the law in Ghana as we speak.
Thank
so
you.
the answer to that is no.
Yes, thank you. A lot more people are asking for the slides and also for the link to register for CPD point. Please let's repost the link. Slides. Okay, Olivia Kofi, very insightful and educative presentation. Please, how do I handle a person who is divorced, stopped working, has no child? He has siblings who are supportive but has become extra quiet and show little interest in social gathering. Anytime I try to find out his worry, his answer is, I shall tell you later. Prof.
I think that the person may be suffering from clinical depression, because I suspect this has been going on for more than the period that we need to diagnose depression. Social withdrawal, lack of interest. I don't know what other things are going on, but that's what we need to assess. I think that she should encourage the person to see a mental health professional as quickly as possible.
So see a mental health profession, or encourage the person to see a mental health professional as soon as possible. Do we have Dr. Joel Nyako on now? Joel.
We're still struggling to get her. We don't really know what's going on with her at the moment.
Okay. Joel, also please post the CPD registration link again. Thank you.
All right.
Sorry, are there only 2 speakers? I thought there were more than 2.
There's a third one, Honorable Ruth.
There's Ruth, and then there is the
Honorable Anyemedu is also trying to get through. In fact, I hear there's 3 weeks to primaries, and he and his co-sponsor are all in the villages campaigning, yes, on the field. And it seems where there are network challenges. They've promised to call in rather, but then again, their phones are out of coverage area. And so if by the end of the webinar, we don't get through to them, we can reschedule them for subsequent webinars, subsequent series.
Okay. Do we know what is happening to Dr. Idunya? Hello, kindly give us a few minutes. Dr. Dunyako has joined. We are trying to get her to be able to unmute and join. Please, a few minutes. Dr. Dunyako, you are a co-host now. Kindly unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Great. So I'm going to share my screen.
Dr. Dunyako, kindly send your slides to
Yes.
Dr. Agorinya or Dr. Sedonia to share.
Okay. For me. Okay,
Yes,
great.
Thank you.
Okay.
But you can start.
Okay. Just give me a few minutes. I think I can do this. I'm sure. Great. So,
Hello, Dr. Dunyako.
please, can you see my slide?
Hello, Dr. Dunyako.
I think your network is better when you're not presenting.
Yes.
So kindly share the slides on the facilitators WhatsApp group. We'll do the presentation for you so that you can save your bandwidth.
Please,
Oh, she's gone off again.
She can also send the slides and then turn off her video. And if she can do audio, then as you do it, she'll talk. If that doesn't work, one of us can, go through the slides for her.
Okay. It seems we are having some serious challenges with Dr. Edunyako's network. So I would give us a few minutes to ask questions. Maybe you have some questions from the previous webinar or from Prof. Ohene's presentation, or about suicide and what's decriminalization in general that you would like to know about. You can ask those questions now, and if we are still unable to reach Dr. Dunyako by the time we have answered all the questions, we would call it a day. So you can put up your hand or put your question in the chat box. I don't think there are any I missed, but I'm still going through them. Just indicate that you want to talk and I would allow you to speak or to ask your question, make your contribution as we wait for Dr. Binyako. Any questions? Okay, I'm not sure. There's a question from Anthony. Is the new law available now, and how do we get access to it? I'm not sure what this question is about.
But when Parliament makes laws, they are printed in a gazette, and you can access them. The first place is the Assembly Press, but then they usually make them available in some of the should I say, stationery shops. So you can get a copy of the law once it has been. What I'm not sure is whether it has been signed into a law yet by the president, because after the parliamentary procedure, the president has to give his assent and then it becomes a law. But the parliamentary proceedings and all the details are available in the record of Parliament. I forget the technical name that they give to it. And this is available for a small fee in many of the official, certainly Assembly Press, which prints the parliamentary proceedings. The Hansard, it's called. You can get a copy of the law from the Hansard.
Thank you very much, Prof. Christian, how soon are the security agencies going to be educated on decriminalizing laws?
The education must be a continuing process. I have seen a judge convict somebody under the Colonial Act, which was repealed in 1972. So clearly, I don't know whether that's from his days in law school or whatever. He never upgraded himself. He was not aware that the law had changed. But that was the law under which he had convicted somebody. And also, some people continued to use the 1972 law, even after the new law was passed in 1912. So unfortunately, very often there's a gap between what the law is and what the executors of the law use. Of course, they are wrong. And if you went to court, you would always win against them. But it needs somebody to stand in for you. If nobody knows or nobody takes it up, you will be wrongly convicted. So we have to educate them. I think it's a task that maybe the Psychiatric Association
Hello.
will have to take up. But it's not just the Psychiatric Association. So also must the Bar Association, the Ghana Medical Association, human rights groups, and all civil society organizations who are interested in the rule of law and for the dignity of the human being, that people who are unwell or who are facing distress should not be further stigmatized and their condition worsened by calling them criminals for doing something that is not within their control. I agree with you, we need to educate them, but it's a duty that all of us must share.
Thank you very much, Prof. Mauli Anglogan says, kindly organize this for the community psychiatric workers. We deal with most of these cases. However, most of us are not here. Let's replan this. Duly noted, Mauli. I'm sure Psychiatric Association of Ghana will be more than happy to take on that task. Can we flash the slide showing the various service providers, please? BFUG, we would share the resources available on all our social media handles. Dr. Gorinya, if you could even start posting our social media handles here, it will be shared there once this webinar is over. Link for registration, more people asking for slides. Okay. Nanama, are the clients who are brought into any of the mental health institutions or facilities providing these services, giving some relief with initial payment? I'm asking because I've had patients who reported to the hospital by themselves with evidence of self-harm or attempted suicide and couldn't reach relatives and needed them to be assessed and follow up. And I had to pay for the services rendered. I know that if you are brought in with evidence of self-harm or you are suicidal, we give care before we what's the word? Yeah, we give care before we ask the patients to pay. I'm not sure when you joined, but I stated the fact that even at Accra Psychiatric Hospital, some have gone on admission, been stabilized, and been discharged home without paying anything. And I'm sure it's the same for Pantang Hospital and Kolebu and all the other government facilities providing mental health care. I'm not sure about the private facilities, but at least for the government facilities, when it's suicide or self-harm, we offer first aid or we stabilize the people before we talk about money. Why do men complete suicide more often than women do? Can risk of suicide be inherited? If one's father succeeded with suicide, well, let's increase the risk for the children. Prof.
Yes, the second question first.
Yes.
I mentioned that if there's a family history, and certainly if unfortunately your father before you died of suicide, you do have an increased risk of also, behaving in a suicidal manner. And I don't want to directly say it's genetic, but definitely it is familial. The risk is definitely increased for those who have a family history, whether it is a father, a parent, or another close relation. So that is one of the things we must ask wherever people come to us. We want to know, even if their parents are deceased, what killed them, because that gives a hint as to some of the things you should look out for. So it is partly genetic, well, partly inherited, let's put it that way. There was another question related to that.
Men?
Yes, okay. The thing about suicide is that women are recorded to engage in far more attempts than men. The methods that females use are often not lethal. So there's more attempted suicide by females than men. However, there are more completed suicides by men than women because the men tend to use more lethal methods. A man is more likely to drink a big dose of poison, is more likely to swallow more pills, and more likely to shoot themselves than a woman would. So whilst far more women would survive from deliberate self-harm and attempted suicide, but for the men, there are more recorded deaths from suicide than females, because the methods that the men use tend to be more lethal.
And then I think this will be the final question. How do you help someone with underlying mental illness who attempts suicide and who is not getting the needed support from the family?
Well, if you say not getting the needed support, I know that sometimes families may not be too helpful, but it seems to me that you are now taking some responsibility for them. And if you think that their lives are in danger, the law allows you to should I say, commit them to treatment legally. It's possible to swear an affidavit in court, and it doesn't take as long as many people think. You can, if it's an urgent thing, you can get them into treatment under a certificate of urgency. You can also get a court order committing them to treatment. All you need to do is to persuade the judge that they are not well and they are doing something that is in danger of harming themselves or other people. And the judge will give an order that they should be taken in for treatment. That is a court order, so they can't help it. They will be taken in. There's normally a time limit. The judge may say you have 2 weeks. And during that time, they will be treated. Hopefully, many of them will become more insightful and agree to receive treatment on a voluntary basis. But if they do not, the attending doctors have the option of extending the period that is required for treatment. So it is possible to use legal means to compel them to take treatment. I believe Dr. Nyaku's slides are ready, so maybe we should start.
Yes, Prof. Her slides are ready, but we are still unable, she's still unable to join. So
Ruth can do it for her. I've done enough, so my voice is boring. Let Ruth or one of the other people do it for her. We can't keep everybody waiting. 390.
Dr. Usenchi. Dr. Usenchi.
Oh, Dr. Brown, yourself, why not? Just speak to the slides. I think it's better. People will follow. If there are any questions, we can all chip in to answer, because in the absence of questions, I don't think it's right that
it seems like I'm not seeing any more questions on there. What's happening to me, my own? Okay. Oh, Someone suggested something. Let's see.
Dr. Brown, I suggest that you go through the slides.
Yes,
whenever
please.
you're able to.
Yes, please. Sure. So how to communicate with a suicidal person. And I'm doing this presentation on behalf of Dr. Pele Dunyako. Can I have the next slide, please? Unfortunately, I have not seen this at all. Okay, so this will be the outline of the presentation. Establishing of contact or rapport, gain confidentiality or trust. I might have to skip this: features of a suicidal person, actions or steps, and conclusion, and then references. Yes, please. Okay, this is just going over what Prof have already said, that the person who talk about suicide, I think if we don't leave here with anything at all, we should leave here with the fact that those who talk about wanting to end their life are more likely to do it. It's not just talk. It's a myth that if they wanted to do it, they won't say anything. They actually would say something before they do it. And then getting the means to take your own life, so such as making plans. You know, the person buys a weapon, or they buy pills, poison. That should let you know that they are planning to end it. Withdrawing from social contact or wanting to be left alone. So somebody who outgoing, friendly, all of a sudden becomes withdrawn. But in the same way, Prof talked about the fact that the person who is a bit more careful, all of a sudden becoming reckless, it should also be a warning sign. Talking about wanting to die, expressing feelings of hopelessness or being empty or feeling trapped, the changing behavior, and then, yes, this all should alert us to know that the person in front of us, our loved one, our relative, our patient, might be suicidal. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, please go back. Okay, so your role as a citizen, and there are 5 action steps that you can take. You should ask. Prof already emphasized this. Ask what is happening to them. Ask if how they are feeling. Mention the changes you've noticed to them, and ask them what is happening to them. And be there. This includes not being judgmental, being sympathetic, and just being there. Sometimes just listening without offering any advice initially is all a person might need. And then help keep them safe. For instance, if you realize that they live alone, you might need to bring them to a place where they won't be alone. If they have access to weapons or to things that they can use to harm themselves, you should take those items away from them and help them connect. If they have withdrawn from family or from social activities or from friends, you might help them ease gradually back into those activities and follow up. You don't just do this and leave them there. Follow up. Yes, I think I've spoken about this already. Okay, so the asking, how are you asking? Please go back to the previous slide. No, not this one. The next one. You should ask them the question, are you thinking about suicide? That communicates that, hello.
Dr. Brown, continue, we can hear you.
Yes, but the slide, go back to the one before this one. Okay, so asking about,
Yes.
yeah. So asking the question, are you thinking about suicide? Communicate that you are open to speaking about suicide in a non-judgmental and supportive way. Be direct and be unbiased. Also be non-judgmental. And that opens the door for effective dialogue about the emotional pain. You should also listen. You don't just ask like we do. Sometimes we ask for asking sake, and we're not even paying attention to what the person is saying. So ask and listen, so you know how to be there for the person. And as Dr. Prof. Ohene already said, you should also try and determine the severity. And he went through the steps with us. Also, the frequency and likelihood to follow through with the suicidal ideation. So somebody who has a plan, somebody who can tell you how they intend to end it, has a plan. And that will tell you that this person is more likely than the person who says, yeah, well, I wish I wasn't alive, but I haven't thought of how I might end my life and I have not made any plans. Okay, so by asking, you are able to also determine the behaviors and thoughts associated with the increasing suicidal risk. Do not aim to trap the patient into unwanted disclosure, but to assess severity of intent and attend immediate risk of completion. Next slide, please. So other questions that you can ask, how can I help? Because the person is saying they are in pain, or saying they wish they were not around, or they want to die. How can I help you? How can I help you feel better? Also, how do you hurt? How do you feel about the future? And then, have you ever thought that life is not worth living? Have you ever wished to go to bed and not wake up? And have you had thoughts of ending your life? These ones are other ways that you can ask. If you asking the question directly makes you uncomfortable. Please, next slide. Go, next slide. So after you've asked these questions, then you can follow up with, I'm so glad you told me that you're thinking of suicide, or I'm sad you're hurting like this. What's going on that makes you want to die? And when do you think you will act on your suicidal thoughts? And what ways do you think of killing yourself? Do you have access to a gun? So all these are determining how firm or what plans they have in place and the methods they hope to use to end it. Joel, next slide. We've talked about what to say. What are some of the things that really don't help? Other people have it much worse. You know, I'm not sure how many of us were on the last webinar, but our last speaker talked about the fact that she has survived suicide. And she talked about the fact that though she didn't know it was criminal, knowing it wouldn't have helped her. Because at that point, or at that time, she was not thinking straight. She was not thinking right. So asking or telling her that other people have it worse, or even the fear of going to jail, would not have deterred her, you know. And this only adds to the guilt and make the people feel bad. Other people have it much worse. Why are you being so dramatic? Why are you doing this to get attention? How could you even think about that? And how could you be so selfish? And then suicide is a sin, you are going to hell, and all the other things we like saying. It helps no one. So we should avoid saying them. Please, let's continue. Next slide, Joel. Have you tried going out more, working out, changing your job, etc.? These are all parts of the things that you shouldn't say. And then you are not. You are just having a rough time right now. The person is telling you they feel like ending it, and you are telling them they don't feel like that. Okay, so help is possible. Next slide. as already mentioned, the first step is to be there. Next slide. Physically present and also speak on the phone when you can. Any other ways that show support for the person at risk. And then follow through with the way you say you'll be able to support. Do not promise more than you are capable of delivering. For instance, if it's a person is looking for a job, for instance, and that is what is causing them so much distress, you are not in a position to offer them employment unless you own businesses that you can employ them. But otherwise, don't overpromise and underdeliver. And then do not commit to anything you are not willing or able to accomplish. Okay. Because then if you commit to something like that and you are not able to, you only make things worse for the individual. Help them develop some ideals for others who might be able to help. And then find out who and what they believe will be the most effective source of help. So it's not you giving them what to do, but you are helping them to recognize the help that is available to them already and encouraging them to assess it. Next slide, please. Please, next slide. Why is it important to be there? Being there for someone with thoughts of suicide is life-saving. Increasing someone's connectedness to others and limiting isolation has been shown to be protective against suicide, both in the short term and in the long term. A low sense of belonging, perception of being burdensome, isolating behavior, lack of purpose, all these things contribute or are likely to make the suicidal ideas or risk worse. Please, let's continue. Okay, I have no idea what I'm looking at now. Anyway, so I think this is a study or that theorized that connectedness is a key protective factor, not only against suicide as a whole, but in terms of the escalation of thoughts of suicide to action. Please, next slide. Their research has also shown connectedness acts as a buffer against hopelessness and psychological pain. So by being there, we have a chance to alleviate or eliminate some of these significant factors. Let's continue, please. Help keep them safe. How do you do that? First of all, it's good for everyone to be on the same page. After the act step and you've determined suicide is indeed being talked about or being contemplated, it's important to find out a few things to establish immediate safety. Have they already done anything to try to kill themselves before talking with you? What sorts of access do they have to their planned method? Next slide. Knowing the answers to each of these questions can tell us a lot about the imminence and severity of the danger the person is in. For instance, the more steps and pieces of a plan that are in place, the higher their severity of risk and their capability to enact their plan might be. Joel, next slide. Or if they have immediate access to a firearm and are very serious about attempting suicide, then extra steps like calling for emergency help or driving them to an emergency department might be necessary. I already mentioned that taking the firearm or the weapon from them might also be a step in the right direction. Then helping them to connect. Helping someone with thoughts of suicide connect with ongoing support can help them establish a safety net for those moments they find themselves in a crisis. Next slide, please, Joel. And then following up. How do you follow up? After your initial contact with a person experiencing thoughts of suicide, and after you've connected them with the immediate support system they need, make sure to follow up with them to see how they are doing. Leave a message, send a text, or give them a call. Check on them to see if there's more you can do to help them. Next slide. And why is this necessary? Again, it increases feelings of connectedness and share your ongoing support. There is evidence that simple action like sending a caring postcard potentially reduce the risk of suicide, reduce number of deaths by suicide in high-risk population after discharge, and supportive ongoing contact may be important also in prevention. Next slide. So in conclusion, say establish contact with the person that you're worried about or you think might be having suicidal thoughts based on the observed characteristics we talked about: social isolation, recklessness, saying goodbye. You establish contact with such a person. Then you ask them if they are having thoughts of suicide. Then keep them safe, be there, keep them or help them to establish connections, and then follow up. Next slide. Okay, so these are her references. Thank you. I hope I made sense. And I'll pause here for questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brown, for standing in for Dr. Pearl because of the network challenges. Those asking for the slides, one of the slides has been shared in the comment section. We'll get you the other one as well. Thank you.
Any questions, any comments, any contribution? Okay, I see a hand up. Samili, kindly unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very nice presentation there. My question is, what would you consider to be the role of our religious leaders in the management of attempted suicide or suicide issues? Thank you very much.
When you say their role, I guess they should also take the same kind of attitude that we're advising everybody else to do. If somebody is suicidal, they should point them out to help. They should not tell them that, look, if you do it, you go to hell and things like that, which I suspect many of them would do. That we all know is not very helpful. What they should do is to recognize that anybody who is suicidal is in a lot of distress. They can try to find out more, and if they are convinced that indeed this is the way they are thinking, they should be aware that this means that there is an underlying problem, and therefore they need to be quickly assessed by a mental health professional. My simple advice would be that if anybody who has suicidal ideas comes to them, they should point them out to hospital. Some of them would think that and say things like, well, this is from the devil, and we banish it. That is not going to help anybody. If you are a religious leader and you recognize that one of your flock comes to you with a problem like this, recognize that indeed it is a call for help, that they have a problem and they would be best helped by a professional mental health individual. So you should quickly point them to that direction.
Thank you very much. Well explained.
Samuel Frimpong, kindly unmute yourself and ask your question. Samuel Frimpong. Okay, there's a question in the chat box then. Do suicidal thoughts have expiry periods? For instance, if your wife informs you today that last 2 weeks, when she went through your WhatsApp messages, she went to the kitchen and nearly committed suicide with a knife, should you still take her seriously? In other words, what should you do? Prof.
Well, I did mention that these thoughts are not forever. That's why there is hope. So if you want to call it an expiry period, that is fine. But it doesn't also mean that they can't come back. What she was talking about is probably an impulsive action as a result of extreme distress at that point in time. But it's important that you find out whether this is something that she gets whenever she is faced with an issue, or whether it was a one-off thing. If she is back to normal, it's important just to reassure her and tell her that next time that she feels distressed, she should rather talk to somebody instead of, seeking out a knife or whatever other method that she thought she would use, because that cannot be the answer to the problem.
Okay.
So when you have suicidal thoughts, it doesn't mean you continue having them forever, no. But they come, they go, and on another occasion, they may come, but they may not come again.
Thank you, Paul. There's another one. Thank you for the presentation. I want to know how patient confidentiality is managed with getting help for people with suicidal tendencies.
Yes, as we mentioned, there's a limit to what we call confidentiality in patient-doctor relationships. If a patient comes to tell you that she wants to kill somebody and has plans, it's your duty, in fact, to warn the person. That's a well-known phenomenon, well-known axiom in psychiatry. In fact, if you fail to do it, you yourself may be guilty before the law. So if somebody wants to commit murder, homicide, or for that matter, wants to take their own lives, it's your duty to do whatever you can to prevent that. And that, if it involves telling a significant other so that they will be on the watch out or they'll be able to offer help, then you should. You do not breach any laws by telling those who should know that this individual has thoughts of self-harm. In much the same way as if they plan to kill somebody, which does happen. A paranoid person may have plans to end somebody's life because he or she falsely believes that that individual is against them, and so, or is harassing them, and may make such plans. If they tell you that you should inform the people and take steps to try to help the person involved who has the ideas by way of treatment or care.
Thank you very much, Prof. So I've just been informed that Honorable Anyimedu is joining us. Dr. Usechi. Dr. Usechi, we are ready for Honorable, please. Dr. Usechi. Technology today. Hello, Dr. Usechi. Dr. Senchi, if you can hear us, we can't hear you. I can see you have unmuted yourself, but we can't hear you.
Dr. Brown, I think there are people whose hands are up, so maybe whilst we could attend, allow them to
yes, Joel.
contribute.
I got the impression Honorable was on a short time, so I was halting those to. Okay, well, once we establish contact, I would stop the question. So yes, I have a few questions. So Sammy Lee, is this an old hand or this is a new one? Hello? Okay, DFUG, kindly unmute yourself. DFUG. Ralph Usochi. Please unmute yourself. Oh, someone says he's unable to unmute. Okay.
The host would have to enable them to unmute.
Okay. I have.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Good evening. Wonderful presentation. I wanted to just part a comment on the question that was asked earlier on about the role of religion. What research has shown is that at various levels of the suicidal behavior and intent, religion comes in handy, especially those are the early phases of contemplating suicide. But when it comes to those who have had like multiple attempts and they are transitioning into like full dying by suicide or dying by suicide, religion doesn't appear to be very preventive when it comes to that area. So I think that, it will play a very critical role in the initial phases. We should encourage, as many people who can use that as a tool to help individuals. The other comment I'd like to add is that sometimes we lump those who become suicidal as a result of extreme stressful events vis-a-vis those. Oh, sorry.
Yes, Honorable, please, you can speak now.
Well, I don't know.
We'll come back to you in a bit then.
If they want to call me in.
You are on now.
Okay, right. And I hear from
I don't know if you can hear now, but can you alert?
Hello, Ruth.
Hello.
Can you hear Honorable?
Not really.
Honorable, please go ahead speaking and let's see.
Let them call me in.
Okay.
And I'm going to try if I can get into the Zoom, right? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ruth. So Senchi.
Yes, so we'll let Albert call him in.
Okay, Dr. Ruth, please, I'm on standby.
Okay, Dr. Sedo here.
Yes, I'm on standby to call the honorable. I don't have his
Yes,
contact.
please do. Please do.
Albert's number sent to the platform.
Good evening, honorable.
Hello.
Good evening, honorable.
Good evening.
Please, you are live with Psychiatric Association of Ghana, the live webinar. Thank you very much. You can go ahead, please.
Right. So let me hear from the host. What am I supposed to say?
It's about the decriminalization of attempted suicide. We are having a series of presentations to the general public and health professionals.
Okay.
Yes.
Good afternoon to you all. What I can say in short is that we are grateful to the assistance that we got from the Psychiatric Association and from the various professors and doctors that gave us in-depth knowledge. We have passed the law now, and it's a simple law of decriminalizing suicide attempt. Now, we are of opinion that any person that will get to a level of saying that I would want to commit suicide, the doctors have educated us, the psychiatrists have educated us to believe that that person has gotten to a level that he would be treated, he or she will be treated as an abnormal situation. And that's why the person needs counseling. Most of the time, a person that gets to that level by our laws, by our criminal law, we rather arrest the person and try to prosecute the person or imprison the person. It makes the situation worse. And if the person gets any opportunity, he would repeat the act. People were of the opinion that once we don't punish any person that attempts to commit suicide, then we are opening the floodgate for any person, or we will increase the statistics of the suicide attempt. It is not, we are not any person that plans to kill himself or herself. The person is just not making an attempt. If the person aims at succeeding in what he wants to do, we are losing the person. And it's a responsibility of the state to make sure that we protect each and every person, including those that are not normal or those that have a mental disorder or mental dissolution. Now, what we have said, we are not leaving the person free. If the person, there is a law on mental disorders and what the authorities would have to do to that person. So we have shifted this to the Mental Health Act, that any person that is found in that state, the person must be dealt with as if the person has been referred to the mental hospital, and then the consequences and what other things or interventions that the professors and the doctors would have to do to help the person would happen. However, any person that assists another person to commit this offense would be punished. But the person that gets to that level that he or she would want to make an attempt, we consider that person as abnormal situation, and we would have to refer the person to the medical. To see when the person gets to that level, in accordance with our Mental Health Act, it becomes a mental health situation. It is a mental situation, and that is why we remove that and place it under the mental health. So that's about all that I can say, and we are very grateful that we got the assistance from the professors and the experts. If there are any questions, I will take them now.
All right, Honorable, thank you very much. We are grateful that the lawmakers have agreed and accepted the fact that most people who attempt suicide have an underlying mental health condition. Most people, the lawmakers have agreed. Now we want to ask a question. What is the state of the legislation as at now? Has it been signed into law and gazetted?
The state of the law is that we have passed it. The third reading has been done and it's been passed. When we've done that, it is forwarded to the president that assents. So I have to check whether it has been assented or not. But we've done the first reading, second reading, consideration, and third reading of the law, and it's been passed into an act. It remains either the president has signed or he has not signed, but I have to do my check.
All right, thank you very much, Honorable. What timeline are we looking at, roughly, please?
I wouldn't know, but I don't think it would. If by law, if it gets to the president and the president doesn't assent to that, the president would have to refer the bill back to refer it to the Council of State, and they would have to argue reasons why the president should not sign. But I don't think this is a controversial bill. Probably by now the president has accepted the bill.
All right, thank you very much. At the national level, please, what are the plans to educate the police and the judiciary? Because we know they are at the enforcing level. So what are the plans to educate the police and judiciary nationwide?
We are grateful to what you are doing, and this is one of the interventions. And if there is any time you invite the experts and you want to invite us as Parliament or Constitutional, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs, the committee that deals with this law, we are readily available to help.
All right, thank you very much. Honorable, we are grateful for your time with us this afternoon. Do you have any final words? If anybody has any questions, please, you can put in the chat box so that Honorable can address it for us quickly. He has very limited time. But Honorable, if you have any final words before any final questions, please.
What I can say is that if anybody is looking at it, that the lawmakers we have been too lenient, I would entreat the person to put himself or herself into the shoes of the parent that has a child in that agony. So if the child that has made an attempt to kill himself or herself is your own child or what, would you be interested that we prosecute such a person when in fact he has a mental agony and it is a health issue and it is a mental issue? With that, if any person would put himself or herself in that, I think that they will come to understand us and then the proponents of the bill and agree with that. We need to understand it. It is not a criminal matter. It is a health issue. And the psychiatrist, thanks to your association and the authorities, has helped us to understand this better. And we are forever grateful to them.
Thank you very much, Honorable. So that was Honorable Enyimadu Enchi, MP. Yeah, that was Honorable Enyimadu Enchi. I hope I got the name right. Thank you very much, sir, for.
Yeah, right. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sedo here. There are about 3 more questions in the chat box that I'll quickly run through. Someone wants to know how suicidal ideations manifest in children. Are they the same as in adults? And then, so how do you recognize the suicidal risk factors in children? Are children suicidal at all? If they are, how different are theirs from adults, and how do you recognize it? Prof.
Okay, great question. Yes, children can have suicidal ideas. It is not as common as in the elderly, but it does happen. Many people forget that children can also be depressed. Those who believe that depression can only arise from some significant life event or environmental issue, we'll have another thing. Depression can occur de novo. And in children, when you notice withdrawal, not wanting to play with other people, or in fact, school refusal or truancy, that is different from what they used to be. You need to be careful. It's important to talk to them about it. Find out whether they think they are facing any problems, whether there's anything worrying them. And there's nothing, do they feel happy? You can even ask them whether sometimes when they go to bed, the next they wish that they would not wake up again the next day. And treatment or management of children is a little tricky. In general, we do not recommend antidepressants for children for various reasons, including the fact that we talked about suicidal ideation as a consequence. It seems to be even more rampant when it comes to children. So we generally do not use it. But therapy works in them. And it's important to reassure them. The reasons and feelings that they have are similar to adults. Feeling of loneliness, feeling that nobody loves them, nobody cares about them. And so this must all be explored and attended to. But the simple answer is that yes, children can also have suicidal ideation, and it's important that we must bear this in mind. We should also remember that the presentation of depression, which is one of the commonest causes of suicide, may be a little different in children. I mentioned in passing things like truancy. So a child who normally likes going to school will take off as if they are going to school, but they go and they won't go to class. Or they come up with things like the teacher doesn't like me, my friends are against me, although there may be no true evidence for this. Some of them also, you find that they are not concentrating anymore, or they also behave like a depressed adult. They become withdrawn, not interested in anything. Whenever you notice a change in the person's behavior, it's important that we do something about it. And therapy is very important. Ideally, somebody who has expertise in dealing with children must be recruited to deal with children like that.
Thank you very much, Prof. The other question is a worker with suicidal thoughts or who had attempted one is taken from the workplace and put on treatment. How can that jeopardize his or her reinstatement to work after recovery?
I think, again, we are talking about certain things. One is stigma, and the general stigma associated with any form of mental illness, with suicide and its attempt as a whole, and people's knowledge or lack of knowledge about suicide and its causes and consequences. I think that a lot of therapy and education is required, both for the affected individual as well as for the other people in the organization. Because there's a tendency for them to think that, oh, this chap, there's something wrong with him, he's crazy, he's weak. How can you want to kill yourself? And things like that. I can imagine in a workplace, many people making such comments. It's only when they are educated to recognize that this is something that could happen to anybody. This is something that has arisen as a result of probably some underlying condition, and that it does not mean the person is a loser or a bad person, but he's actually afflicted by a serious condition. And it's important that they rally around and help the person. If they are sympathetic and they understand what is going on, and the person has been strengthened by therapy, when they do get back, they probably will be able to talk about it openly themselves, which might help the other people. You may yet find out that if it's a big office, that a few other people may have gone through the same issues before and maybe not told anybody. So I think education and therapy is important to all sides, quite apart from treating the individual himself.
Thank you, Prof. Ralph Osanchi, your hand is still up. Please unmute yourself and ask your question. Ralph Osanchi. Or is it Ruth?
Yes,
I
yes,
think
yes.
Since it was Ruth, ignore it.
Okay, all right. Is there any part of the law, this is from Louise, is there any part of the law that makes financial provisions in handling issues of persons safe from suicide attempts? I guess you meant suicide survivors. Prof, do we know? Maybe we should have asked Honorable this.
Yes, we should have. My understanding of the question, maybe I'm wrong, is that will you be given money if maybe the reason for your attempted suicide is because you are broke? I doubt if there's anything like that. And anyway, it would be a dangerous thing because I think it would urge a few more people to do things like that. But if it's about whether they will be given treatment even when they don't have money, I think we should look at it from point of view of all the medical emergencies. That you have a medical emergency, the emphasis should be on saving life. We know that some people may not have the money, and the people who bring them are also just doing a good job and not be able to stand in for them. But I think, as I said earlier, we should emphasize trying to save lives instead of the money. But I do not know whether the law has any provision for where to get money in order to save them. Generally, the saving them should not involve very much money. If it is like somebody has attempted suicide by gunshot wounds or slashing themselves and is bleeding, it's a medical emergency first before we think of the psychological effects. So I think we should just regard every true attempt at suicide as a medical emergency and deal with it as such, even in the terms of the monetary considerations.
Yeah, and then what will happen to people who have been victims of the old law? Does this person want to know if there's any relief, reprieve? I don't know. Are they going to be compensated?
Actually, well, I don't know about compensation. It's not very common in Ghana here. But, and anyway, the truth is that those who were convicted, although we think it's unfortunate, that was the law as at then.
As at then.
But right now, I want to believe that if there's still anybody in jail as a result of the old law, they can be released as soon as attention is drawn to it.
All right. Thank you very much, Prof. As usual, you've been exceptional. Thank you. Any questions? No questions, then we are bringing the webinar to a close. I have seen that some of the slides or all the slides have been shared in the chat box. But if there is anybody here who requested for the slides and have not seen it in the chat box, kindly contact any of us, myself, Dr. Sedo here, Dr. Agorinya, Dr. Usuenchi, and we'll be more than willing to help you. The resources for where you can get help in terms of the facilities that provide help would be shared on all our social media handles. And as usual, thank you for coming. Thank you for participating. Thank you for all your questions and contributions. And we hope to see you soon. Enjoy your holiday. Bye-bye.